You probably wouldn't believe me if I told you that for the past 15 years, I've been living with a secret bigger than my own dreams. That secret isn't a forgotten romance, nor is it a small mistake that people can easily overlook. It's a multi-billion-dollar empire. An empire I built from digital art and technology that the world once dismissed as meaningless games. Every morning, I look out the window of my penthouse, skyscrapers reflecting the sunlight, while I still pretend to live a life like everyone else. A poor, anonymous life, just like what my family always expected from me. Do you know what that feels like? The feeling of having to hide a massive truth about yourself every single day, because if it ever comes out, the world as you know it might never be the same. My name is Zoe. I am the founder and CEO of an NFT empire worth over $2 billion. A number that might sound like a fantasy to you. But if you saw the days when I was living in a tiny apartment, scraping together rent money, you wouldn't believe it was me. My entire family, even my friends, all thought I was just a dreamer. A young girl with a head full of ideas but no real talent. They never understood that I started from nothing. From digital images that only a small niche of people cared about at the time. I didn't just ignore all the doubt my family had. I used it as fuel to build something they never could have imagined. The truth is, at this point, I've created a massive empire with millions of followers worldwide and multi-million-dollar deals. But I can't let my family know about it. Never. They would never understand, never accept, that I could be successful without following the path they laid out for me. And for the past 15 years, I've done everything I could to make sure they still think I'm the old Zoe, the broke girl with nothing but a pile of sketches and misguided ideas. I'd lived in that secret, worked non-stop, and built an empire known only to me and a few close companions. There were only a few times I let them catch a glimpse of my success, but even then they dismissed it as luck. A fluke. I'd quickly grow out of. And today, everything is going to change. Not because I want to show off, but because I can't hide it anymore. An article is about to be published. About me. About the NFT empire I built. And no one in my family knows. They won't understand that I did it all on my own. My story, a story they never saw coming, is going public, and they'll be forced to face the truth I've hidden all these years. But are they ready for it? You probably can't imagine what it felt like to read the first few lines of that article. Everything inside me froze, then spun with every word, every figure I never imagined would be exposed. First, the headline. Zoe Sullivan, founder of a $3,800,000,000 NFT empire. That number wasn't a fantasy, wasn't a dream. It was real. A truth I had buried for 15 years. The Forbes article lit up my phone screen, bright and gleaming like a wound waiting to bleed. In that moment, I couldn't breathe. That feeling, when you watch all your secrets, all your efforts to build a different image, suddenly stripped bare before your eyes. Looking back, I remember all the times I pretended to live as a poor, even struggling woman, just to keep my success hidden from my family. The dinners with them in an old apartment I deliberately chose, driving an old car to keep up the act. It was all part of a perfect performance. But now, everything has changed. Nothing will be a secret anymore. As soon as the article went live, my phone started ringing non-stop. First was Marcus, my brother. Just hearing his name made my chest tighten, because he's the logical one, always following the path my parents set. He's the perfect child, with a stable job and easy approval from our family. But today he called me with a voice full of barely contained rage. "Zoe, what the hell is this?" Marcus snapped the moment I answered, skipping any greeting. "What the hell is this empire? Why am I finding out from a Forbes article?" I just gave a soft laugh. "Don't worry, Marcus, I was just doing my job." Cut the act. "Zoe, why the hell would you hide this from the whole family? How could you stay silent for this long? Mom and Dad, they were worried about you." "Worried?" I cut him off, my voice colder than ever. "Worried that I wasn't chasing their dreams for me? Worried because I didn't do what they wanted? Maybe I was too angry, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. For years, I had lived under the weight of my family's expectations, always feeling like the disappointment, the one who couldn't keep up. They told me I'd never amount to anything, told me to stop dreaming and just be normal. And now, they were finally finding out how wrong they'd been. Marcus went quiet for a few seconds. Zoe, you really made that much money? I smiled, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. About $3,800,000,000. But that's just an estimate. The real number's even higher. I heard Marcus gasp, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. He had lived his entire life on a safe, predictable path, never doing anything without a safety net. And now, everything he believed was realistic had just been shattered by one sentence. Then why didn't you tell us? Why hide it? Mom is going to be so shocked when she finds out about this. Marcus, I didn't hide anything. I just didn't want to hear the criticism. Didn't want to be seen as a failure and then get lectured about the family values. I just wanted to do what I love without needing anyone's approval. I put the phone down and looked at the screen. The next message came from Olivia, my sister. She's the one who always brags about her sky-high salary, her stable job, and the luxurious life she built. And now, even she couldn't contain her curiosity. Zoe, hey. Is this real? When were you planning to tell the family? We really had no idea what you were doing. I calmly replied, yes, Olivia, it's time you all knew the truth. As soon as I hit send, my mom called. This time I couldn't ignore it. She had always told me that success is meant to be shared, yet she was also the one who advised me to give up art and find a real job. I answered with a quiet breath. Zoe, what have you done? The Forbes article? We need to talk to you. I'll see you and Dad at the family meeting, I said, the surprise in her voice confirming that everything was about to change for good. I looked out the window, feeling like everything was moving fast. This wasn't just the beginning of change in my family. It was a turning point in the journey I had started long ago. No one could look down on me anymore. No one could call me a failure. And I knew when I saw my family again, they would see the poor little sister. They would see Zoe Sullivan, the woman who built a massive empire they never even imagined. I didn't have to live in hiding anymore. My phone rang again. This time, it was Marcus. His voice came through the line the moment I picked up, without delay or the usual politeness. I could feel the tension from the other side. Zoe, what the hell is going on? Marcus started with a question that was clearly not a greeting. He never called me without a serious reason, but today was different, and I knew right away that this wasn't normal. I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. Hi, Marcus. What's going on? What's going on? He shouted, no longer able to contain his frustration. What is this? How could you hide this empire from the family? We're family, Zoe. Why would you do this? I couldn't help but feel a small, quiet satisfaction inside. For 15 years, I had kept this success hidden, and in this moment, Marcus, the one whose criticism, advice, and judgment I'd endured since I was little, finally had to face the truth. I didn't hide anything, I replied, my voice calm, though I felt stronger than ever inside. I just didn't think it was necessary to tell you or the family what I was doing. I didn't want everyone thinking I was doing something weird or wrong. And I didn't want more criticism. There was a brief silence between us. I could hear Marcus breathing on the other end, like he couldn't believe what had just happened. And I understood that feeling, because I had lived with it for the past 15 years. How much did you actually make from this? Marcus asked, his voice now sounding so shocked he could barely keep it together. I looked down at the phone in my hand and gave a soft smile, feeling something indescribable inside. I had something he never thought I could have. And now I could finally show him the truth I'd hidden for so long? About $3,800,000,000, Marcus, I said, trying to make my answer sound casual even though I felt deeply fulfilled. And that's just a low estimate. The real number is even higher. Immediately I heard Marcus gasp. What? he said, like he couldn't believe his ears. $3,800,000,000. You made that much money? And you didn't share it with the family? Marcus, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't share it because I didn't need anyone's approval. Mom and Dad always told me to get a real job, always pushed me toward the safe path, and they treated me like a failure for years. But I did this because I believed in myself, not because of anyone else. I could sense the anger, the hurt in Marcus's voice. He was someone who followed the family's traditional path. He never dared to step outside the box our parents had created for him, and now I, Zoe, the so-called outsider, had achieved something he could only dream of. But you, why did you hide it from everyone? Mom, Dad, Olivia. We're family, how could you not tell us? Marcus asked, his voice shaking with what sounded like betrayal. I felt a wave of emotion rise inside me, but I kept it in. Don't you get it, Marcus? I had to hide this success because I didn't want to keep living under the weight of your expectations. I didn't want to be the poor little sister, the one everyone worried about all the time. But now? I've taken control of my life, and I'm proud of that. And Marcus? He had nothing to say. Silence stretched on for a few seconds. I knew he didn't want to admit it, but I also knew what he was feeling. That shock, that sense of being left behind when the truth turns out to be nothing like what he thought. He had always been the older brother, the one the whole family looked up to. And now he had to face the fact that I had done something he thought was impossible. So, what's next? Marcus asked, still sounding stunned. What are you going to do with all that money? I looked out the window, where the morning sun reflected off the tall buildings. I could feel strength in every breath, in every decision I'd made. I'm going to keep growing my empire. I'll invest in projects I believe in, develop new technologies. I'll make sure everyone knows I'm not a failure. I'm a creator, a visionary. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I don't need anyone's approval. Everything has changed now, and I, Zoe Sullivan, will never go back to the path my family laid out for me. So, when are you coming home? Marcus asked, his question sounding like a plea for me to return to the old world I had already left behind. I smiled softly. I'll come home, but this time I won't be the Zoe you used to know. This time, I'll show you who I've become. And with that, I hung up, leaving my brother with questions that had no answers, while I prepared to face the family. The ones who had always believed I was a failure. The night before the family meeting, I couldn't sleep. Images of my family kept replaying in my mind. The looks of pity, the criticism I had endured for so many years. Mom, Dad, Marcus and Olivia. They all thought I was just a dreamer. They didn't understand me, never had. In their eyes, I was just a girl who refused to follow the right path. Someone living in a digital fantasy world they called a game, or a passing trend. That day, when I decided to pursue digital art, my father immediately objected. I can still remember his voice, full of disappointment, when he told me, Zoe, you can't live in that virtual world forever. You need to choose a real job, something that gives you a stable future. You can't keep chasing what people call digital art. That's just child's play. Those words hurt more than anything else. I asked myself over and over again, would my parents ever truly understand me? They wanted me to follow a path they believed was safe and stable, but I couldn't abandon my passion. I wanted to change the world, even just a little. But all they saw was a crazy girl, who didn't know what reality was. I still vividly remember that dinner, sitting among people I called my family. Mom sat beside me, always giving me that look, full of concern but also full of judgment. Zoe, you need to learn to be more realistic. Don't waste your time on those useless things, she said, her voice soft but full of pressure. Her words made me feel exiled in my own home. But I couldn't accept that reality. How could I keep living under the shadow of the expectations they placed on me? How could I live a life they wanted without following my own dreams? Then there was Marcus, the older brother I had always lived in the shadow of. He was always perfect in their eyes, always doing what they expected. "What are you doing, Zoe?" Marcus asked, his tone full of judgment. "You should be looking for a stable job, a real one. Don't waste time on things that have no future. You'll never make a living off that hobby." Every word from Marcus felt like a sharp arrow piercing me. He didn't understand, and never wanted to. He just wanted me to be like him, doing what the family thought was right, what society considered success. But I couldn't. I couldn't live a fake life like that. That was when I made a decision. I wouldn't let my family control my life anymore. I would carve my own path, no matter what they thought of me. And I did it. I sold my digital artworks, the very ones they called meaningless. With every piece I sold, I felt like I was taking one more step toward freedom. But even so, I couldn't share that joy with them, because I knew they would never understand. I lived in the shadow of silence, pretending to be a failure in my family's eyes. Every time I visited home, I made sure to wear something plain, drive my old car, live in a small apartment I had chosen on purpose. It was all an act. I couldn't let them see the truth, that I had already succeeded. They wouldn't be able to handle it. And now, with the Forbes article out, I no longer had to hide. Everything I had built was suddenly exposed. For the world to see. As I read the words on my phone screen, everything suddenly felt clearer than ever. I wasn't a failure. I had built an empire my family never even imagined. Right after I finished reading the article, my phone rang. It was Marcus. His voice cracked, disbelief clear in his tone. "Zoe, what did you do? Why didn't you tell us?" I sighed, feeling tired. "You didn't need to know, Marcus. I don't need your approval or anyone else's. I did this for myself, not for them. But we're family." Marcus couldn't accept it. "How could you hide the fact that you made billions of dollars and not say a single word?" I scoffed. "Don't you get it, Marcus? I didn't hide it. I just didn't want to live under the shadow of this family anymore. I don't need them judging every move I make." Then my mom called. She had always loved me, but also always insisted I live by what she thought was right. She never saw my art as a real career. "Zoe, you have to understand that art isn't a stable job, it's just a game. You need a real career, stop dreaming." Those words, once again, felt like knives in my heart. But now, I don't have to listen to that criticism anymore. I've achieved things they will never have, and I won't allow anyone, not even my family, to devalue what I've done. Now, I'll face them. Not as the failed daughter, but as Zoe Sullivan. The woman who built an empire even her own family has to bow down to. For all these years, I lived in the shadows, under the mask of poverty. A struggling artist, always barely making ends meet. But no one in my family knew I had millions in my bank account. I've asked myself so many times, would I ever truly be free, ever truly live as the person I've become? Or would I always have to pretend to be a failure in their eyes? When I first started in digital art, everyone thought it was a joke. My mom, my dad, Marcus, and Olivia all insisted I was being ridiculous, that it was just a trend, that I was wasting time on nonsense. They looked at me like I was an immature child who didn't understand the real world. And they kept saying, "Go ahead. But don't forget you still need a real job. You can't live in this illusion forever." Those words were deeply ingrained in me. Even though I had made huge strides, had sold my work for millions of dollars, I still chose to keep everything hidden. No one would ever understand. Never. They would only see digital paintings and think I was just drawing for fun, that it had no real value. So I kept living in a small apartment, driving the old car I bought back in college, wearing simple clothes I knew they'd never pay attention to. Every time I went home to visit my family, I had to pretend I had nothing. I knew that if they ever found out I was successful, they wouldn't know what to do with me. Everything would change, and I wasn't ready to face their judgment. I didn't want to hear things like, "You still don't get that art isn't a real career, Zoe." Those words would feel like a slap in the face, a slap to everything I had built. I told myself I wouldn't let them see this truth, even if it meant living a fake life. I started pretending to be poor, living in a tiny apartment, eating simple meals, wearing clothes that didn't stand out. They would never know I had built a multi-million-dollar empire, that I had created an NFT empire no one ever expected. My mom still called me often, worrying about my life, asking if I had enough money. "Zoe, you need to be careful with money. Don't forget that art isn't a long-term way to make a living, you need a stable job." I always had to hear things like that, and I always replied, "I'm fine, Mom, really." Even though deep down, I knew I was far richer than they could ever imagine, I couldn't say it. I didn't want to face the pain or have to prove I was right. I kept up the act, even though I could easily afford a luxurious life. Lavish vacations, extravagant parties, expensive things. But no, I couldn't let them see any of it. Because if they knew, they'd never see me the same way again. I'd just be a traitor, someone who turned her back on everything they expected of me. The long days passed and I kept working tirelessly. I built a multi-million-dollar NFT empire all on my own, without anyone's help. But I couldn't tell them, they would only laugh at me, call it unrealistic. Mom would say again, "Zoe, digital art won't support you, you need a real job." And I knew I would never change their minds. They would always see me as a dreamer, someone who didn't understand the real world. There were nights I sat alone in my small apartment, staring at my computer screen, the place where I created digital artworks worth millions of dollars. I sold those pieces to art lovers all over the world, but I couldn't share that joy with anyone. It was a kind of loneliness I couldn't put into words. I lived in the shadows of my own success, afraid that if I was exposed, I'd lose everything. I remember once, at Christmas, my family held a big gathering. My mom sat next to me, worried as usual, and asked, "Are you doing okay, Zoe? Do you have enough money to get by?" I just smiled and said, "I'm fine, Mom." That was when I realized I had become an actress in my own play. A play no one could break, at least not in the eyes of my family. Day after day I kept living in the shadows, pretending to be poor, pretending I had nothing. The digital art I created, the money I earned, all of it was hidden. And I didn't regret it, because if I told my family, I'd lose everything. They would never look at me the same again. They would only see me as a traitor, someone who didn't follow the path they wanted. Even so, part of me knew that one day, the truth would have to come out. And when it did, I wouldn't have to pretend anymore. I had built an empire with my own two hands, and one day, the world would have to acknowledge it. But by then, I wouldn't be living under the shadow of pity or criticism anymore. There would only be me, Zoe Sullivan, the one who rose up and built an empire my family never even saw coming. My phone vibrated in my hand. I looked at the screen and saw my mom's name. A strange rush of emotion welled up in my chest. Emptiness, anxiety, but also a hint of satisfaction knowing I was about to face them. A special family meeting was coming, and I knew once it happened, nothing would ever be the same again. I slowly pressed the answer button. My mom's voice came through immediately, full of worry and firmness. "Zoe, where are you? I haven't been able to reach you for days. Your father's worried too. We need to talk." Every word she said felt like a gentle accusation, a reminder of everything I had been hiding all this time. I tried to hold myself together, to stay calm. "I've just been busy, Mom, with some things." My answer was even, but deep inside, a part of me had already started preparing for what I'd always been avoiding. Mom wasn't satisfied with that. "Zoe, you can't keep avoiding the family like this. Your father and I are always worried about you. You have to understand that. Have you ever thought about how we feel when you keep hiding like this?" She continued, still trying to get through to me. I looked at the screen again and saw a new message from Marcus. "We need to talk. Mom and Dad are really worried and you can't keep hiding anymore. We're meeting this weekend. Everything needs to be clear." It was hard to face them, but now, I couldn't turn back. I couldn't keep living a lie, even though for years I had succeeded, had gone beyond what they believed was impossible. But now, everything I had built would have to be revealed. I looked back at myself, remembered all the times they criticized my work, all the harsh words and looks of disdain I had endured. But now, they would have to see me in an entirely new light. I nodded to myself, tapped on family meeting, and confirmed a gathering at a private resort I had already arranged. Everything was ready. I had prepared all the information they needed to know about me and what I had done all these years. All the details about my NFT projects, my investments, the contracts I had signed. Everything would be clearly presented. A few days later, the day of the special family meeting arrived. I woke up early, getting ready for the tense encounter. Today, I would no longer be the Zoe they used to see, the one they always thought had failed. I had changed. I no longer had to hide anything. What worried me wasn't that they'd be angry or disappointed, it was that they would realize everything they had believed about me all these years was wrong. I had built an empire they never could have imagined. But could they accept the truth? Could they look at me differently? Or would they still see me as a failure in their eyes, even though I had proven my success? When I arrived at the resort, I could see my family's cars parked out front. They were here. I was ready to face them, but the uneasy feeling inside me wouldn't go away. Finally, I stepped into the meeting room where my family was waiting. My mom, dad, Marcus, and Olivia were all seated, their eyes fixed on me as if they were expecting an explanation. Marcus was the first to speak. "Zoe, we need to talk. The Forbes article caught us completely off guard. Can you explain to us what's been going on?" His voice didn't carry the firmness it usually did. This time it was filled with surprise, disbelief. But I could see the hurt in his eyes, like he was bracing for whatever I was about to say. My mom didn't look at me, her eyes wandered elsewhere. "Zoe, what have you done? Why did you hide everything you've been doing all these years?" She didn't say more, but I could feel the disappointment in her voice. It was the same disappointment I had endured for so long. I stood still, looked straight into my mother's eyes and spoke softly. "Mom. Dad. Everyone. I didn't hide anything from anyone. I just didn't want to face judgment, the pity in your eyes. You all thought I was a failure, just chasing unrealistic dreams. But I've done something none of you ever thought possible." I smiled slightly, feeling like these words had echoed in my mind for years, but today they no longer hurt. "Mom, Dad, everyone. I don't need the stability you always wanted for me. I've built an empire, one that none of you could have imagined. I don't need your criticism, because I've proven what I'm capable of." A heavy silence filled the room. My mom and dad, Marcus and Olivia, all stared at me with unreadable expressions. I knew they couldn't fully accept it yet, but I couldn't keep living in the shadow of their expectations. They had to see me. Zoe Sullivan, the woman who built her own empire. I turned toward the screen, where images of my projects, million-dollar contracts, and everything I had accomplished were about to be shown. There was nothing left to hide. Now was the time for them to understand what I had achieved. The day I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. My private island, a paradise I had purchased 2 years ago, was now the place where I would welcome my family. They had no idea this place existed, no clue that I had built something big enough to own my own island. Today, every secret would be revealed, and I had nothing left to hide. When the first Rolls-Royce pulled up to the dock, I could see the stunned faces of my parents and siblings. My mother, always the first to worry about me, now looked around with eyes full of disbelief, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The whole family stepped out of the car, looking around as though they had entered a world that didn't belong to them. This island was unlike anywhere they had ever been. Luxurious villas, an infinity pool with crystal-clear ocean water, modern artwork displayed throughout the space. Everything had been created by my own hands. My mother couldn't hold back. She turned to me, her eyes filled with surprise and concern. "Zoe, where are we? How How did you manage to have all of this? I smiled, but didn't answer right away. I had waited a long time to hear that question. My father and Marcus, the always perfect older brother in the eyes of the family, stood silently, looking around with confusion. "Let's go inside," I said, pointing toward the villa I had prepared for the meeting. Everyone followed me in, the tension in the air thick and undeniable. As we stepped inside, the light from the high-end chandelier shimmered against the walls, making the space look radiant and elegant. The gathering hadn't officially begun, but everything was in place. I could see the astonishment not only in my family's eyes, but also in their whispered voices. They couldn't understand how I could possibly own a place like this, something they'd only ever seen in Hollywood films. I invited them to sit, and once everyone had settled, I stood and looked into each familiar face. My mom, who always worried about me. My dad, who always said I'd never amount to anything. And Marcus, the model son of the family. They were the ones I had lived in the shadow of for so many years. But today, I had nothing left to hide. "This is where I live," I began, my voice steady but resolute. "This is the result of the years I've dedicated to digital art and NFTs. This is what I've built on my own, without anyone's help." My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with confusion. "Zoe, can you explain this more clearly? Is this a dream? You really earned all of this from that game you call digital art?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, Mom. This isn't a dream. This is the outcome of the artworks you always said had no value. I sold those pieces to collectors, to investors, and they paid a very high price. Every time I sold a digital painting, I was building my empire." Marcus couldn't hold back any longer. He stood up, his face filled with anger. "How much are you saying you made? An empire? All you did was draw pictures on a computer. How could that possibly lead to this?" I wasn't surprised by his reaction. He had always believed that everything had to follow a traditional path. A stable job, a degree, a real career. He never understood that art could bring value, that creativity could be a legitimate profession. "I made millions of dollars from this, Marcus. And I tried to convince Mom, Dad, and you to invest in it a long time ago, but none of you ever believed me. Mom, Dad, all of you said I could never make a living from it, and you rejected every opportunity I brought. Now, I can tell you that I built everything you turned down." I looked into my father's eyes. The man who always gave me stern advice about being realistic, about having a stable job. "Dad, I came to you about these opportunities, and you said no. But if you had invested in what I was doing, you would have had a share in $1 billion company, and now, I don't have to hear any more condescending words." The whole room was silent, everyone stared at me in disbelief. But I didn't stop. "I lived like a failure in your eyes. I pretended to be poor, pretended to live in a cramped apartment, drove an old car. I let you believe I had nothing, that I was just a struggling artist. But now? I've stood on my own. This is the result of what I've built. This empire is mine, not anyone else's." My mother lowered her head. Maybe for the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. My father sat there. His eyes no longer filled with doubt, but with silence instead. Marcus was still standing. His eyes were full of anger, but deep down, I knew he couldn't deny the truth. "So, what now, Zoe?" he asked, his voice a bit calmer. I smiled. "Now we sit down and talk about the opportunities you once refused. But this time, things won't be like before. I'm not the Zoe you used to see as a failure." This meeting wasn't just about sharing my success, it was my way of claiming my place in the family, showing them that I chose my own path, and that from now on, I would never again live under the control of those who didn't believe in me. The room was filled with silence when I stopped talking. My mom and dad stayed still, their eyes seeming unable to process what they had just heard. Marcus, the always exemplary older brother, didn't look as confident as he used to. What I saw in his eyes was unease, confusion. Even Olivia, my younger sister who always sought attention and validation, remained quiet. None of them could escape the truth I had hidden for so many years. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself any further. Whether they understood or not, that wasn't my concern anymore. Everything had been revealed, and now it was time for me to face myself. I didn't do this because I wanted their approval. I did it because I needed to prove my worth. Not for them, but for me. At last my mother spoke. Her voice was soft, almost frail. Zoe? You've done things we never could have imagined. I honestly don't know what to say. I looked at her, my eyes no longer filled with anger or resentment. She was my mother. The one who gave birth to me and loved me in her own way, even if she never truly understood me. But now, she had seen her daughter. No longer a daydreamer, but a strong, independent and successful woman. I don't need an apology, Mom, I said gently. I just need you to understand that I chose this path, not to disappoint the family. I did it because I believed in myself. I don't want to live according to anyone else's expectations anymore. Mom didn't say anything else. She just sat there, looked up at me as if, for the first time in all these years, she truly saw her daughter. After a few seconds she smiled. A small but deeply emotional smile. I understand now, Zoe. I'm proud of you. My father finally spoke. Your mother's right. We can't deny this truth. You've done things we never imagined. I was wrong not to believe in you. His voice grew softer, no longer firm, but a sincere admission. I just wanted you, my siblings, and our parents to understand one thing, I continued, my voice calm but every word carried weight. I don't need your approval. I did this for myself. I built an empire, and proved I could succeed without following the path you chose. This is my achievement, and I'm proud of it. Marcus, the brother who always followed the family path, could no longer maintain the strong front he used to wear. He looked at me for a moment, and then sighed, his voice a little tired. Zoe, I was wrong. I didn't think you could do it. Honestly, I couldn't imagine someone like you building something so massive. I thought you were just a kid. Just a dreamer. I looked at him, and though I felt a twinge of sadness inside, I stood firm. I don't need your apology, Marcus. I just need you to understand that I did this without anyone's help or direction. I did it out of passion and belief in my own ability. The path I chose wasn't the one you or our parents wanted, but it was the one I needed to take. Olivia, the sister who always sought the spotlight, finally spoke. So, what are you going to do with all of this, Zoe? Have you thought about sharing it with the family? Her question was laced with a curiosity she couldn't hide, but also a hint of challenge. I smiled and looked into her eyes. What am I going to do? I'm going to keep building my empire. I'll keep creating and expanding new foundations for digital art. And about sharing. That's my choice. I don't have to share anything with anyone. But, if you really want to learn and grow, I'll help those who are genuinely willing. I don't need to do this for approval or recognition from my family. What I need is respect for what I've done, and the understanding that, no matter what they think, I'm still me. Nothing has to change. They may have seen me as the failed child, but today, I've proven who I really am. In the end, my parents, Marcus, and Olivia all fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts. But I knew that, deep inside, they had at least seen a part of who I truly was. Not the Zoe they wanted, but my own Zoe. The woman who built her own empire, strong and confident. Now, I don't need to prove what I can do to anyone. Already done it. And that's all that matters. Zoe's story is a journey of rediscovering herself and affirming her worth amid family expectations and pressure. Through years of silence and hiding, she not only overcame her loved one's doubt but built a digital art empire to be proud of. Most importantly, Zoe didn't do it for recognition. She did it to prove that true success comes from confidence, passion, and perseverance, not from acceptance or approval. Thank you for following Zoe's story. What do you think about Zoe's decision to keep her success hidden and how she faced her family? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.